My daughter-in-law pointed at my own kitchen table and said, "You can't sit with us. Go wait in the laundry room until we're finished eating." And the cold look in her eyes told me this wasn't disrespect. It was intention. What she didn't know was at the moment that door closed behind me, I started planning something she'd never see coming. Before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button so this story reaches anyone who's ever been pushed aside by the people they loved. I was halfway to the laundry room doorway when it hit me, when the truth slammed into my chest harder than age ever had. My own son sat there, eyes glued to his plate, pretending not to hear her, pretending not to see me. His 72-year-old father being ordered around like a dog in the home I paid for, the home I let them live in while they got back on their feet. My foot hovered above the step, lightheadedness washing over me. My fingers trembled against the doorframe. I'd known things were tense, but this crossed a line I didn't even know they saw. I stood there, feeling my pulse hammer my ears, realizing this wasn't just a bad moment. This was the surface finally cracking, showing something uglier underneath, something that had been building for months in whispers, in cold glances, in those quiet dinners where no one asked how my day was. My throat tightened as I looked back and saw her smiling at my son, like she'd done something righteous. Like pushing an old man out of his own dining room was a perfectly normal way to treat family. Tell me, honestly, what would you do if someone talked to you like that in your own house? But that was before the real nightmare even began. The laundry room felt colder than it should have. Dim light from a single bulb flickered, like it was embarrassed to stay on. The washer hummed under my hand as I steadied myself, trying to slow the pounding in my chest. The house had never felt unfamiliar before, not once in 20 years, but suddenly every sound felt foreign. Hostile. Wrong. From the kitchen, I heard plates clink, then laughter, soft at first, then louder, almost intentionally loud. My daughter-in-law's voice floated to the cracked door, cheerful and sweet, like she hadn't just shoved me out of my own life. My son spoke less, but when he did, his tone was clipped, tense. A man caught between shame and fear, and choosing fear. I leaned closer to the doorway, careful not to let the hinges creak. The kitchen lights cast long, warm shadows across the hallway floor, and through that narrow sliver space, I saw her, Melissa, moving around like she owned the place. She served herself a second helping of roasted chicken, then nudged the bowl toward my son with a playful little shove. He forced a smile. The sight made my stomach twist. When my wife was alive, this house had been full of warmth, simmering soups, laughter, soft radio music in the background. Tonight, it felt like I was renting a room from strangers who didn't want me using their silverware. Melissa's voice cut through the hum. I told him earlier, this isn't a retirement home. He's got to learn boundaries. My breath hitched. My son didn't respond. He stabbed a piece of chicken, eyes locked to his plate. She went on, the words dripping with faux concern. He's been getting in the way. He forgets things. He lingers around when we're trying to eat. And honestly, I'm tired of babysitting. I gripped the doorframe, knuckles whitening. Not from anger, at least not yet. It was disbelief. Shock so raw it felt like vertigo. My vision blurred for a second, and I had to blink to steady myself. Babysitting. That was the word she chose for me. A man who raised her husband, who worked 47 years without missing a single day that counted, who opened his home to them when they were drowning in debt. My son finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mel, can we not talk about this right now?" She scoffed loudly. If he can hear us, maybe he'll finally realize he's making things harder. My heart sank like a stone. Something was off, and I'd sensed it long before tonight. The quiet conversations that stopped when I walked into the room, the way my mail seemed to disappear some days, the hushed arguments between them at night. But tonight, the mask slipped. Tonight, it wasn't subtle. Tonight, I saw the truth. My son wasn't just allowing the disrespect. He was terrified of confronting her. And Melissa wasn't just irritated. She was planning something, testing boundaries, seeing how much control she could take without pushback. A cold, creeping feeling slid down my spine. This wasn't a one-time outburst. This was the beginning of something bigger. Their tone, their words, the way Melissa moved through my home with the confidence of someone who'd already decided it wasn't mine anymore. I felt it deep in my bones. This was about more than dinner seating. This was about power. And I was losing it. My breath became shallow. The laundry room walls felt like they were closing in. A flush of heat rose in my chest, then cooled instantly, leaving me shivering. I stepped back, steadying myself against the washer. The hum beneath my palm vibrated through me, grounding me just enough to think. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't overreacting. Something was wrong. Something much darker than the way she had spoken to me. Something that had been building quietly like a pressure leak behind a wall. That's when I realized I couldn't face this alone. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a wink. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, just heavy. Every now and then I heard footsteps crossing the hallway, muffled whispers behind their bedroom door, and once I heard the lock on the front door being tested. By who, I couldn't tell. But I knew it wasn't for my safety. By sunrise, my chest felt tight and my throat dry. I moved around the kitchen quietly, more out of instinct than caution, because Melissa and my son were still asleep. Their bedroom door was shut, but the tension seeped through it like smoke. I stood at the counter slowly stirring a cup of instant coffee when I heard a soft knock on the back door. Not the front, never the front. The back, the one only a handful of people used. I froze, listening. Another knock came, firmer this time but still gentle. Then a voice whispered harshly, "Frank? You up?" Relief hit me like warm water. I unlocked the back door and cracked it open. There stood my neighbor Walt, 68, wiry as an old fence post, wearing his usual camo ball cap and jacket. A man who knew how to read trouble 3 miles before it showed up. He stepped inside. "You look terrible," he whispered. "What happened?" I didn't want to tell him. Pride kept tugging at my tongue. But the truth came out faster than I expected. I told him what happened the night before. The laundry room, the dinner, the words, the tone, the shift I'd felt deep down in my bones. Walt didn't interrupt. He listened, standing perfectly still except for the slow scratching of his thumb against his belt buckle. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Well," he said finally, "that explains a hell of a lot." I frowned. "Explains what?" He hesitated. "Never mind. Sit down first." My stomach tightened as I lowered myself into the kitchen chair. Walt took a slow breath, then said, "She's been talking." My heart skipped. Talking about what? Walt rubbed the back of his neck. To whoever will listen. To her sister. To some ladies in the cul-de-sac. Even to the delivery guy last week when he was dropping off one of your packages. My head jerked. What did she say? Walt looked at me with the hesitation of a man who wishes he didn't know. She said you were slipping, that you were confused all the time, that you forget where you put things, that you walk into rooms and don't remember why. She even said she caught you leaving the stove on. My voice cracked. I've never done that. I know, Walt said, raising his hands. I know. That's why I'm here. My chest tightened again. The air seemed thinner. Why would she say that? Because, Walt said slowly, she wants people to believe it. A cold sweat formed on the back of my neck. The laundry room incident wasn't an impulse. It was a step in a process. I stared at the table. What else did she say? Walt sighed. She mentioned your home, that you might not be able to live here much longer, that she and your son were doing all the work, that it's better for everyone long term if they start planning. The word planning echoed through my head like a warning bell. I sat back, feeling dizzy. Planning what? Walt didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the front pocket of his jacket and pulled out something folded, worn from being handled too many times. A piece of paper. He slid it across the table toward me. I unfolded it, and my breath froze. It was a printout of a rental listing, my home's address, my house, online, listed as available for rent, immediate occupancy, newly renovated space suitable for families. My vision blurred. I gripped the table to keep from tipping forward. They're listing my home while I'm living in it. I whispered. Walt nodded grimly. Saw it last night. Thought maybe it was a mistake. But then I noticed a username on the listing. He pointed. The username was a combination of letters and numbers, but one thing stood out. Melissa C _ 2024. My hand began to shake. Harder than yesterday. Harder than they ever had. Walt continued, voice low. I knew she'd been up to something. I just didn't know it was this. The room felt like it was spinning. She's trying to kick me out. My own son, my own daughter-in-law. Walt sat across from me, leaning forward. They're not just trying to push you around. They're preparing a story for everyone else. They're making you look weak, so nobody questions them when they take over. The word sounded absurd. But the more I thought about the past few months, the missing mail, the strange phone calls, the bills that never arrived, the times Melissa handled things for me, the more it made sense. All right, Walt said, clapping his hands together. We need more proof. Concrete proof. Something we can take to someone who actually matters. Who? I whispered. A lawyer? The police? Maybe, he said. But first, we need to see what else she's doing behind your back. He motioned toward the hallway. Her phone, her papers, her laptop, anything. I froze. You're saying we should search? Walt shrugged. I'm saying if someone's getting your home like a deer, you should see the knife before it hits your ribs. Normally, I would have dismissed him, but not today. Not after the laundry room. Not after hearing what she'd told the neighborhood. Not after seeing my own home listed for rent. We moved quietly, like two old soldiers sneaking behind enemy lines. The hallway carpet muffled our steps. The bedroom door was cracked open, just enough to show the glow of a charging phone on Melissa's nightstand. Walt scanned the room with the sharp eyes of a man who'd hunted most of his life. There, he whispered. We didn't go inside. Not fully. Walt leaned in just far enough to see the screen of her phone light up with notifications. A text preview popped up. From Property Management, J&R Realty. Message. We have a family interested. Can they tour the home this week? My heart stopped. Another preview blinked. From Melissa. Message. Yes. My file is moving out soon. Phil. Father-in-law. Moving out. Soon. Walt exhaled, shaky. She's already telling businesses you're leaving. I stepped back from the doorway, gripping my chest. The room spun. My breath turned shallow. Walt grabbed my shoulders. Frank, you're not crazy. You're not imagining this. She's doing this. I nodded slowly, trying to steady myself. I don't understand why. Why now? Why like this? Walt looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Sad, angry, protective. Oh, buddy, he said softly. That's the part we're going to figure out. Because this isn't just disrespect. This is calculated. As we went back to the kitchen, a strange calm settled over me. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I wasn't alone anymore. Walt stayed right beside me as I sank into the chair. We'll find everything, he said. Everything she's hiding. I nodded. But where do we start? He tapped the table lightly. With the thing people always forget about. What's that? Paper trails. They never lie. He stood. Let's check the home office. You know, the room your son said they weren't using? Bet there's a treasure chest in there. He was right. There was papers, emails printed out, receipts, notes, a half-written budget plan, my bank statements, but ones I'd never seen before, several marked with red pen, and one note that made my blood run cold. Deadline to transfer utilities. Must be completed before final move-out. I stared at it, unable to breathe. They weren't planning to push me aside. They were planning to erase me. Walt looked at me, jaw tight. Frank, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is an attempt to remove you from your own life. And as shocked as I had been, nothing compared to what we found next. A folded document tucked beneath the printer tray. My name, my address, and the bold title at the top. Notice of termination of tenancy. Dated for next month. Signed, though sloppily forged, with my son's name and a landlord's signature block meant to look like mine. I sat there staring at it, my whole body trembling. She forged my signature. Walt nodded grimly. She did. And if she files this, you'll be legally evicted. My heart hammered so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Melissa wasn't just cruel. She wasn't just manipulative. She was preparing papers. Walt placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Frank. I looked up, tears stinging my eyes. We're going to stop this, he said, but you need to brace yourself, because this is only the beginning. And that's when the situation exploded. The explosion didn't come with yelling or slamming doors. It arrived with silence, heavy, suffocating silence. Around 9 a.m., Melissa and my son finally came out of their bedroom. I heard them before I saw them. Soft footsteps, hushed whispers, the kind of whispering people do when they're plotting. I tucked the forged notice of termination of tenancy under a stack of placemats just seconds before they walked into the kitchen. Melissa froze when she saw Walt sitting across from me. Her smile tightened. "Oh, you have company." Her tone wasn't surprised, more like she walked into a crime scene she needed to cover up. Walt leaned back in his chair, calm as a man on a fishing trip. Morning, Melissa. She didn't return the greeting. Instead, she slowly lifted an iced coffee to her lips, eyes fixed on me over the rim. My son trailed behind her, already tense. He avoided my gaze completely. "Morning, Dad," he muttered. I nodded but didn't speak. Melissa set her coffee down a little too hard. "We didn't know you had guests." I forced a neutral tone. Walt just stopped by to check on me. Her eyebrow twitched, just a fraction, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't know how to read faces. But Walt caught it. His eyes narrowed for a moment, and a small, knowing smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, I check on him a lot," Walt added casually. "Make sure everything's running smooth around here." Melissa's expression tightened further. She walked to the pantry, opened it, closed it, then started rearranging items on the counter that didn't need rearranging. My son hovered behind her like a shadow. Finally, she turned. "So, Frank," she said, using my name instead of Dad, "we need to talk." My pulse quickened. Walt didn't move, but he angled his chair slightly toward her. Not threatening, just present. Melissa folded her arms. "We had a conversation last night, and after thinking about it, we've decided things need to change." "We?" Walt asked, deliberately inserting himself. Melissa ignored him. She looked straight at me. "We think it's better if you stay out of the kitchen and common spaces when we're using them. It's just too overwhelming for us. You come and go unpredictably." My stomach twisted. She was framing the narrative. Just like Walt said. My son cleared his throat. "It's just temporary, Dad, while we get everything organized." "Organized for what?" Walt asked, smiling like a man about to walk into a poker hand. "He intends to win." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "For our plans. Some things are changing in this household." "In his household," Walt corrected. My son flinched. Melissa didn't. She stepped closer, her voice soft, too soft. "Frank, you're getting older. You need structure and security. And we need to be able to live here without constant disruptions." A chill raced down my spine. Constant disruptions. My breath caught. She continued, voice dripping with practiced concern. "We love you, but your behavior lately has been unpredictable. It's making things hard for us." I blinked. "Unpredictable?" Melissa nodded gravely. "Yes. Forgetful. Confused. Wandering. Wandering." My heart sank. She'd been planting those seeds all along, and now she was saying them out loud in my face, like they were undeniable truth. Walt scoffed. "I've known Frank 25 years. He's sharp as ever." Melissa turned to him, annoyed. "This is a private family discussion." He smiled. "If that were true, you wouldn't be trying to convince the whole neighborhood he's losing his mind." Her lips parted, but she didn't respond. Got her. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then she regained her composure and said, "We're calling a family meeting tonight, and you," she jabbed a finger toward me, "need to be prepared for some difficult decisions." Difficult decisions. Walt muttered, "She means eviction." Melissa shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Legally," she said slowly, "this house isn't solely yours anymore." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. My son stepped forward, swallowing hard. "Dad, we talked to someone. A lawyer. There are options for transferring home ownership to protect you and make things easier for us." I stared at him. "Protect me from what?" He didn't answer. Melissa did. "From yourself." The room fell silent. Then Walt stood, placing his hands firmly on the back of his chair. "Time for me to head out," he said, though his eyes never left Melissa. "Frank, I'll see you in a bit. We got some things to finish up." Melissa stiffened. She knew exactly what he meant. After Walt left, the house seemed to shrink. Melissa crossed her arms, looking determined. "You need to start respecting our boundaries," she said. "No guess unless we approve. No touching things in shared spaces. And no wandering around the house at night." "I don't wander," I whispered. She shrugged. "Well, that's not what we've been telling people." My chest tightened. "Who's we?" "My support system," she said. "People who believe me." My vision blurred around the edges. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a poisonous whisper. "And trust me, I've told enough of them that if you try to accuse me of anything, you'll look like the one who's confused." My heartbeat thudded sickeningly in my chest. She wasn't planning only to push me out. She was building a case. And then, as if she hadn't shredded me enough for one morning, she delivered the blow I wasn't expecting. "I spoke with a social worker yesterday," she said. "Off the record, she agrees it might be time to consider assisted living for you." I felt like I'd been punched. My son avoided my eyes. Shame flickered across his face. But he didn't argue. "Assisted living?" I said, voice trembling. Melissa nodded calmly. "Yes, a nice place. Somewhere with memory support." "I don't have memory problems," I said loudly. She lifted a single eyebrow. "Are you sure?" Something inside me cracked. "I raised your husband," I whispered. "I built this home. I opened my doors for you. I fed you. I let you stay here when you had nowhere else to go. And now you want to send me away?" She crossed her arms. "It's what's best." My son muttered, "Dad, let's not make this a thing." A thing. A thing. They were dismantling my life and calling it a thing. My voice dropped to a tremble. "And what about this house?" Melissa paused, just a second too long. She glanced toward their bedroom. At that moment, I knew something waited in there. Something she didn't want me to see. Something that wasn't just planning, but done. Her eyes flicked back to me, cold. "We'll talk about the house tonight." I swallowed. "Melissa, what did you do?" She smiled, a small, chilling smile. "Everything we needed to." My heart thudded violently. I felt lightheaded. The kitchen swayed for a moment, and I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. Melissa moved past me, brushing my shoulder in a way that felt like a warning. "Oh," she added, almost casually, "don't go into the office today. We got sensitive paperwork in there." My blood went cold. Sensitive paperwork. I knew exactly what paperwork she meant. She had no idea I'd already seen it. Every page, every signature she practiced, every step of her plot to erase me. As she walked away, my son followed her without looking back. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't just personal. It was planned, a full, coordinated effort. And if I didn't act soon, I wouldn't just lose my home. I'd lose the life I had left. We moved like conspirators, not because we wanted to be sneaky, but because that's what the situation required. Walt drove. I sat beside him with the papers we'd ripped out and photocopied from Melissa's office, my hands folded around the stack like prayer beads. He kept glancing over at me the way a man watches the weather, looking for signs of a storm. First stop was the post office. Walt had a contact there, a kid from his bowling league who'd taken pity on the idea of an old man possibly being hustled out of his house. The clerk behind the counter looked bored until Walt mentioned my name and the listing. Suddenly, she was all ears, her posture straightening like someone who realized a crossword clue had a second meaning. Anything odd on file? Walt asked. She typed and clicked, then frowned. There's a change of address form, she said slowly. Filed online last month. File from an IP in town. She printed it out and slid it across. The form had my name, my address, and the forwarding address, an apartment a few blocks away in my son's name. The submission time was 2:03 a.m. I felt the room tilt. So they moved my mail, I whispered, or tried to, Walt said. Whoever did it forgot one thing. You don't need to get your mail forwarded if you live here. So this looks like they were trying to intercept anything coming to you. We left with a copy in my pocket. Each paper felt like a small nail being hammered into a coffin I hadn't agreed to. Next we went to the county recorder's office. My feet felt heavier with each step. The clerk there had the kind of tired patience people pick up from dealing with paper and signatures for decades. You want a title search? She asked. I swallowed. Please. The property at 14 Elm. She typed my name. The computer coughed up a list. I scanned the screen, then my breath caught. There was a document recorded that morning. A quitclaim deed transferring the property from me to an entity called Carter and Company. Holdings, LLC. The recording stamp glared at us. Recorded 9:12 a.m. What? Walt said, louder than he meant to. I felt like the floor dropped from under me. My name was on the deed, or at least a signature that looked like mine. A signature that could have passed for mine from a distance. The notary block showed a notary public seal dated last week. How is this possible? I whispered. I never signed anything. The clerk's expression was flat. Forgeries happen, she said. But if it's recorded, you need a lawyer fast. Walt slammed his palm onto the counter. A single, sharp sound. We need copies. All of it. Everything. They printed 20 pages. The deed was accompanied by an affidavit, a power of attorney, and a series of documents that looked like they'd been stitched together to create a legal cover. Someone had been thorough. We walked out of that office, and the air felt thin as paper. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My house. My name. On paper, signed away. I'm not a man given to panic, but something inside me broke like an old hinge. I swallowed and forced myself to think. We need a lawyer, I said. Now. Walt nodded. He knew someone, a woman named Teresa, who'd once defended him after a traffic mishap. She ran a small practice out of a converted storefront. She liked old-timers and hard coffee and had a way of looking at a crisis as if it were a math problem, messy but solvable. Teresa met us in her office within the hour. She looked at the deed with a face like granite. This is a fast one, she said, tapping the stamp time. They recorded before you knew what hit you. She asked questions quick and precise. Dates, names, who had access to my mail, any sign of coercion. We walked through everything. When I told her about the laundry room and the dinner, she didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. She wrote on a yellow pad, and then stood up. All right, she said. We file an emergency injunction to freeze that deed. We file a fraud complaint with the sheriff. We send a cease and desist to anyone trying to advertise or rent the property. And this is key. We get you on camera where you belong. She looked at me with a small, fierce smile. You standing up at a neighborhood meeting and saying you never signed a deed. That's a good start. People like seeing the man in the house. It ruins a scam when a supposed dead man is standing in the doorway. I felt, for the first time in days, a thread of something like hope. Teresa took our evidence and began the paperwork. She explained gently that the legal wheels could be slow and that forgers sometimes hide behind shell companies. She mentioned notaries to be subpoenaed, handwriting to be analyzed, bank records that could show where money moved. Each task was another piece of the puzzle. The lawyer's words turned my fear into a plan. But if they're this organized, Teresa said quietly, they might be making moves faster than we can file. It was the last thing I wanted to hear. The idea they could outpace the law made my skin crawl. We left her office with filing receipt copies and a phone number for the sheriff's fraud unit. Teresa told us to sit tight for a day. She was filing an emergency motion. She told me to keep my phone off. I made one more stop alone that afternoon. The community center where our neighborhood watched the world unfold. They kept security camera footage, the kind of grainy, time-stamped film that catches people doing what they think no one sees. I asked politely, and the director, a woman named Rosa, pulled up footage from the last weeks. We scanned hours of meetings and handyman deliveries and volunteer sign-ups. Then we paused at a clip from late one evening. There was my son, standing with a man I'd later learn was Eric Carter, the same name on the LLC. They were shoving a small safe into the back of a truck. Melissa stood beside them, stuffing envelopes into a tote bag. The timestamp flicked, 2:05 a.m. The truck's license plate was blurry, but Rosa could enhance. The footage showed my house in the background 2 blocks away. A delivery route, a conversation, a furtive movement. To anyone else, it might look like neighbors loading a donation box. To me, it looked like a theft in plain sight. I felt sick. Later, Rosa handed me a copy of the footage on a USB. Walt and Teresa crowded into my recliner that evening, and we watched it in slow, jittery play. The safe going into the truck. The envelopes. My hands clenched so hard the paper cut the flesh. Why would they take a safe? Walt asked. Teresa's jaw tightened. To move cash. To move documents. To conceal. The more we pieced together, the uglier the picture became. My son had been acting strange for months, but now there was a motive. Debts we'd only heard rumors about. Calls at odd hours. A car he'd been driving he couldn't afford. Eric Carter, the outside man, was no friendly neighbor. He had business ties and a record of quick flips. Melissa, with her practical demeanor and easy smile, had the kind of personality that can charm a clerk and notary. The next day, we went to the bank together. Teresa sat across from the branch manager, while I sat in a chair and listened to words I'd hoped never to hear. There was a withdrawal, the manager said. Large amounts. We have CCTV from our teller window showing 2 individuals. One appears to be Mr. Hargrove's son. The other, unfortunately, matches an identity used by Mr. Carter in other accounts. The footage from the bank showed 2 silhouettes, heads bent over a counter, signatures passing under the glass. The manager said they'd frozen new accounts and were cooperating with law enforcement. They also gave us copies of the withdrawal slips with signatures. They looked like signatures, but the more you studied them, the more you could see the hesitation, the tremor of someone copying another person's hand. We filled out more forms. We filed more reports. Each signature we collected, each camera frame we saved, made the story harder to dismiss. Word started spreading quietly through the neighborhood like a low hum. A few people called to say they'd seen the listing online. One elderly neighbor handed us a receipt he'd kept from the caterer Melissa had used for that dinner a few weeks back. It was paid in cash. As we collated the evidence, something shifted in me. Not the brittle, resentful thing that had flared at the laundry room, but a steadier determination. The fury wasn't childish. It was practical. It wanted names, dates, proof. It wanted the truth lodged under glass, where everyone could see it. We had the deed recorded. We had the forwarding form for my mail. We had footage of men moving a safe. We had bank withdrawal footage. We had receipts paid in cash. We had a forged eviction notice. The pieces were aligning into a pattern. Manufactured incompetence, document forgery, theft, a plan to profit off me. But the final piece was still missing. The one that would make the case airtight. Late that night, when everyone else had gone home and the house hummed with the sleepy mechanical sounds of heaters and distant traffic, Walt called me on the landline. His voice was low and urgent. Frank, he said, I checked the county clerk's database again. There's another document recorded today. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure. What is it? I asked, my throat tight. You should sit down for this, he said. I sank into the recliner. He told me there had been a predicate filing, an application for an emergency conservatorship, filed by my son, requesting immediate control of my assets pending a hearing. It was stamped, filed, awaiting judicial review. If approved, it would give them the legal power to manage my money, my house, and my medical decisions. Immediately, I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. What? I said, The word barely a breath. Walt continued. And there's more. The filing references a recent incident where you allegedly left the stove on and were found wandering by a neighbor. It quotes an affidavit. There's a notary stamp. The affidavit was sworn by. He hesitated. My son, he finished. I stared at the ceiling until the letters on the wallpaper blurred. An affidavit sworn by my son, probably based on scripted scenes. A conservatorship application filed before any hearing, designed to look like it was urgent. If the judge bought it, even for a heartbeat, they could walk into my house with paper and say, this man is not competent, and the law would follow. I realized then that we weren't just chasing thieves. We were facing a plan that used the law itself as a tool, that bent institutions to a private will. My palms felt cold. The binder Teresa had assembled suddenly felt both heavy and fragile. We had enough to make someone look, to stop an immediate transfer, to issue freezes. But courts moved by days, not hours, and people in motion sometimes outran the remedies. I gripped the armrest until my knuckles went white. We have to move faster, Teresa said over the phone. Her voice clipped. I'll file emergency pleadings tonight. I'll get the judge to consider an ex parte temporary restraining order to freeze the deed and halt any transfer of funds. We'll subpoena the notary. We'll trace the LLC. We'll involve the DA. All of those legal actions were heavy artillery. They were also slow, and even the best legal artillery can be undercut by the simplest of moves. A withdrawal here, an account closed there, a deed recorded under an alias. I looked at Walt and then at Teresa on the video screen. Do it, I said, my voice low but steady. Whatever you need. We worked through the night. I signed forms I barely understood, and then signed more, each signature feeling like reclaiming a bit of myself. Teresa filed pleadings. Walt called neighbors to ask them to save footage and hold on to receipts. Rose at the community center gave us high-resolution captures. A local journalist called, asking for a comment, and Teresa advised silence until we had an order. We were making a case. We were building armor. And then, in the small hours when the world felt most fragile, Teresa's assistant called. Frank, she said, voice thin from the long day. We found something on a recorder's tape you should see. She sent a link. We clicked it in the dim kitchen light. The footage was from a doorbell camera at the house next door, grainy, at 2:08 a.m. Two figures crossed the frame. Eric helped my son carry something bulky from my porch into a dark van. Melissa stood in the doorway, lighting a cigarette, watching. They didn't look like they were stealing a donation box. They looked like they were taking something deliberate, something pre-planned. And then, in the corner of the frame, the timestamp shifted. Another figure appears briefly. A man in a dark jacket, his face turned away. He lifts a small device, angles it toward the porch, clicks once, and the device's tiny light blinks. A camera. My stomach dropped. It was the moment I realized they'd not only been stealing from me, they'd been filming me, recording me in ways I didn't know, capturing moments to use against me, building a dossier. My hands trembled as the images played and replayed on the laptop. They'd been preparing every angle, social narratives, legal papers, physical removals, and secret recordings, as if they were assembling a case file on me to make their story unassailable. We had found receipts, transfers, footage, forged documents. We had bank records, post office forms, and eyewitness testimony. We had a lawyer filing protective orders at midnight. But nothing in all those binders and prints had prepared me for the discovery that topped them all. The realization that they'd been filming me, compiling footage to justify whatever they planned to do next. And for the first time since this nightmare began, the fear that lived under my ribs for days turned into something else. A fierce, cold light that showed exactly where to strike next. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered next. By morning, Teresa had managed to file an emergency motion with the county judge. She texted me at 7:12 a.m. Hearing may be scheduled today. Do not speak to your son or DIL. Stay with Walt. That alone made my blood pressure spike. A hearing? Today? The judge must have sensed something serious for the process to move that fast. Twist 1. While I was still reading the text, a car pulled up in front of the house. Not Melissa's, not my son's. A beige sedan I didn't recognize. Two people stepped out wearing badges. For a heart-stopping second, I thought they were police. They weren't. Adult Protective Services. My stomach hit the floor. Walt was already outside before I could even stand up. "Mornin'," he called to them, planting himself between the porch steps and the walkway like a human wall. A tall woman with a clipboard said, "We received a welfare call about Mr. Hargrove. Anonymous reported deterioration, confusion, unsafe living conditions, and possible elder neglect." My throat closed. Anonymous call? Anonymous my foot. Melissa had escalated the timeline. Twist 2. Walt didn't budge. "Funny timing," he said, "considering we filed a fraud report on the same people who likely made that call." The APS woman turned to me. "Mr. Hargrove, we need to verify your safety." I stepped outside, standing straighter than I had in months. My voice didn't shake. "Ma'am, I'm perfectly safe. But my children are trying to force me out of my home, and they forged documents to do it." The APS workers exchanged looks. One of them lifted a printed packet. "We received evidence, including statements and alleged video clips, showing confusion." Video clips. My vision blurred for a moment. Those recordings they took late at night. They'd already sent them in. Twist 3. Walt cut in. "We have counter evidence. Lots of it. And a lawyer already filing injunctions. You're being used as a lever in a scam." The APS woman hesitated. "If that's true, we'll need verification." "We'll give you everything," Walt said, "but you're not removing him today." They agreed, reluctantly, and left with copies of the forged tenancy notice and possible forgery signatures. The moment their car pulled away, I collapsed into the porch chair, chest tight. "They're accelerating," Walt muttered. "They're scared." He was right. Scammers get boldest right before they fall. Then my phone buzzed, Teresa calling. "Frank, listen carefully," she said. "Your son's emergency conservatorship petition got fast-tracked. The judge wants to see everyone in person today. That includes you." My stomach twisted. Twist 4. "Don't panic," she added. "This can work in our favor, especially if they show their hand too soon." She told us to be at the courthouse at noon. She told me to bring everything. The footage, the forged papers, the deeds, the mail forwarding form, and the binder she'd started. Walt helped me gather it all like we were preparing for battle. By late morning, Melissa and my son finally came home. They walked into the front door like they owned the place. Melissa spotted me sitting in the living room and rolled her eyes. "Oh, good," she said flatly. "You're awake?" I didn't answer. My son hovered behind her, face pale, eyes avoiding mine. Melissa crossed her arms. "We need to talk. Tonight's family meeting. There's a hearing today," I said quietly. "At noon." She blinked. "A what?" Walt stepped forward. "A conservatorship hearing. Guess your anonymous calls and fake signatures got attention." Her face went white, then red. "We didn't. I never." She glanced at my son, furious, as though he let the plan slip somehow. Twist 5. My son whispered. "Mel, they weren't supposed to move this fast." Her eyes snapped toward him. "Of course they move fast. You filed the affidavit." Affidavit. So she admitted it, loudly, in the living room. Walt turned to me with raised eyebrows, silently mouthing, "Got her." Melissa froze, realizing she'd said too much. She glanced at me, then back at my son. Just go get ready," she snapped. He walked away quietly, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. After he left, Melissa leaned close to me. Too close. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You think you can fight this? You think a judge is going to believe you over us? You want a war. Frank, you just stepped into one. War." For a moment, I felt every one of my 72 years. But then something inside me steadied, like a beam straightening in a storm. The judge wasn't the one who needed to believe me. The truth would. We drove to the courthouse, Walt behind the wheel, me clutching the binder like armor. Teresa met us at the steps, heels clicking sharp against concrete. She hugged me, briefly, then shifted into lawyer mode. Stay quiet unless I cue you, she said. Let them talk themselves into a hole. Inside the courtroom, the tension felt thick enough to choke on. My son sat beside Melissa, their lawyer a thin, sharp-featured woman in an immaculate suit. She looked confident, too confident. The judge entered. Everyone rose. After the formalities, the judge looked down at the file. This is an emergency conservatorship request for Mr. Frank Hargrove. Petition filed by son. My son cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor. My father is... Teresa stood. Objection. We request immediate dismissal based on fraud. The courtroom murmured. The judge raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? She clicked open the binder, laying out the forged tenancy notice on the table first. Your Honor, the petitioner's wife forged his eviction notice, attempting to force my client out of his home. She also listed his home for rent without his knowledge or consent. The opposing lawyer scoffed. That's unsubstantiated. Teresa didn't blink. We have digital receipts. She handed over printed screenshots of the rental listing, the linked username, and timestamps. The judge examined each one. Melissa's lawyer shifted. Melissa fidgeted. Twist 6. Then Teresa continued. Furthermore, there was an attempted mail forwarding filed late at night under Mr. Hargrove's name. She slid the USPS document forward. The judge's eyes narrowed. The opposing lawyer began to rise. Your Honor, this could have been... There's more, Teresa said sharply. Walt handed her the USB drive. This contains footage from multiple cameras showing the petitioners and an associate removing property from Mr. Hargrove's home late at night. The judge looked up. Is that so? The opposing lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The momentum had shifted. Teresa placed one final document on the table. And lastly, Your Honor, the deed transfer recorded yesterday morning was forged. Dead silence. Then the judge spoke slowly. Forged. We have handwriting analysis pending, Teresa said, but a visual comparison raises immediate suspicion. Additionally, the notary listed has denied ever witnessing the signature. Melissa's face crumpled. Her lawyer turned stiff. My son looked like he wanted to evaporate. The judge's gaze sharpened. Is this true? Neither of them answered. Then the judge asked me to stand. My legs trembled, but my voice didn't. Your Honor, I said, I'm not confused. I'm not wandering. I'm not forgetting things. I'm being pushed out of my own home by the people I trusted most. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then she turned back to my son and Melissa. Do you have anything to say to dispute these allegations? Melissa's veneer cracked. He gets in the way. He's impossible. He makes things harder. He slows us down. Slows you down from what? The judge asked. Melissa froze. My son stared hard at the table. From moving forward, she stammered. Twist 7. The judge leaned back, voice cold and clear as glass. This court denies the emergency conservatorship request. Melissa gasped. My son looked sick. The judge continued. Additionally, I am issuing a temporary restraining order preventing either of you from modifying Mr. Hargrove's assets, property, or mail. Melissa opened her mouth to protest, but the judge cut her off. And based on evidence presented, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation into potential fraud, forgery, and elder exploitation. The courtroom erupted. Melissa's jaw dropped. My son paled. Their lawyer scrambled to collect her papers. And me? I felt something loosen in my chest. Something stuck since that night in the laundry room. Something I thought I'd never get back. The judge slammed her gavel. We'd won the battle. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. Because as we walked out courtroom, Melissa spun toward me, her face twisted in rage. You think this is the end? She hissed. You have no idea what we started. She stormed away, dragging my son behind her. I watched them go. And that's when everything finally snapped. When something inside you snaps, it doesn't explode outward. Not at my age. It snaps inward, quietly, firmly, like a door locking on a part of your life you'll never revisit again. We stepped out of the courthouse into cold afternoon air. Walt was beside me, steady as bedrock. Teresa walked a half step ahead, already outlining the next filings. Injunctions, fraud affidavits, protective orders. She was speaking, but my eyes were locked on Melissa and my son across the parking lot. They were arguing. Violently, not physically, but with hands slicing the air, faces red, mouths twisted in panic. Melissa shoved a hand through her hair, pacing. She was unraveling. My son looked like a balloon that had lost all its air, deflated, defeated, barely upright. Part of me pitied him. A very small part. But pity has limits, and mine had been stretched thin long before the laundry room incident. They noticed us watching. Melissa straightened herself, cracked her neck, and marched toward me with a tight, furious stride of someone who knows the ground is crumbling under her feet, but refuses to admit it. "You think you're safe now," she spat. "A restraining order won't fix anything. We live in your house. We have rights." Teresa stepped between us. "Actually," she said calmly, "what you have is 30 days to vacate. For the emergency eviction we're filing today on behalf of the rightful homeowner." Melissa's face froze. "What?" she whispered. "You forge a deed," Teresa said softly. "That alone is ground for removal." My son's voice cracked. "Mel, I told you this could happen." She whirled on him. "Shut up. You said your dad wouldn't fight back." Her words were louder than she realized. Several people in the parking lot turned to look. Perfect. Melissa marched toward me again. "You want us gone? Fine. We'll go. But you're going to regret this. You have no idea what you're doing." I met her stare without blinking. "I'm protecting myself." She laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "Protecting yourself? You're alone. You can't even—" Walt stepped in front of me like a human shield. "He's not alone." That stopped her. She hadn't expected anyone to stand with me. Bullies rarely expect resistance. Before she could fire back, Teresa's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then her expression changed. "Frank," she said, "the district attorney wants to see you. Today." My stomach tightened. "Now!" "They want to review the evidence personally. Everything." Melissa's face paled. "You're kidding." Teresa ignored her. The DA's office was only a block away, so we walked. Every step felt like I was approaching the final chapter of a book I didn't know I'd been writing. My heart thudded slow, heavy rhythms, like it knew something was coming. Inside, an assistant guided us to a conference room. The district attorney herself, short, intense, eyes sharp as polished steel, entered moments later. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "I've reviewed the initial packet your attorney sent, and I need to say this plainly. What your family attempted is serious. Extremely serious." My breath caught. They really did commit crimes. "Oh, yes," she said. "Potentially multiple felonies." Melissa wasn't here to hear it, but she wouldn't escape it. Walt slid the binder across the table. "There's more." We walked her through everything. The forged deed, the rental listing, the mail forwarding form, the late-night safe removal, the bank withdrawals, the notarized affidavit. Each new page made the DA's brow tighten further. She finally closed the binder slowly, fingers tapping its cover. "All right," she said. "Here's what happens next." My pulse quickened. "We will open a formal investigation. We'll subpoena the notary, the bank footage, the LLC records, property listings, and social service reports. And if even half of this is verified, your family is in trouble." I swallowed. Hard. What should I do? "You," she said, "need to tell the truth. Publicly if you're comfortable. Your neighbors have heard their side. It's time they hear yours." My heart skipped. A public confrontation? Me? Talking in front of people? Something inside me wanted to hide. But something deeper, the part of me that had been shoved into a laundry room, wanted to speak. Walt placed a hand on my back. "We got your back, buddy." Teresa nodded. "This is the moment." The DA said, "There's a community meeting tonight at the neighborhood center. Your case has already circulated. People will ask questions. I suggest you answer them." My mouth went dry. But I agreed. By evening, the community center was full. Rows of folding chairs, neighbors whispering, a low buzz of speculation filling the air. Some people looked at me with sympathy, others with confusion. A few looked guilty, the ones who had quietly believed Melissa's stories. Then Melissa and my son walked in. The room went silent. Melissa's chin lifted, defiant. My son kept his head down. The meeting opened with general announcements, but no one cared about those. The tension was a weight pressing down on everyone. Finally, the moderator cleared his throat. We understand there have been concerns regarding the Hargrove household. Mr. Hargrove, would you like to speak? My heart hammered. Walt and Teresa flanked me like sentries. I stood. Everyone stared. I took a breath, shaky but mine, and said, "Last week, my daughter-in-law made me sit in the laundry room while they ate dinner in my own home." Gasps rippled across the room. But that, I continued, voice steadier now, wasn't the worst of it. I lifted the forged deed, held it up high. She forged my signature to steal my home. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" I lifted the rental listing. She listed my home as available for rent. I lifted the mail forwarding form. She tried to redirect my mail. I lifted the eviction notice. She prepared to evict me. Melissa jumped up. "He's lying. He's delusional." Teresa cut her off. "We have evidence. All verified." The moderator motioned for her to sit. She refused at first, but finally slumped into her chair when people began glaring. I continued. I trusted them. I gave them a home, and they tried to erase me. My voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth. My son finally looked up. His eyes were full of something between regret and fear. "Dad, I didn't want this. Melissa said it was the only way." "Stop." Melissa hissed, grabbing his arm. "No," he said, pulling away, voice trembling. "I'm done lying." The room held its breath. Then he said it. She planned everything. Everyone turned to Melissa, her face drained of all color. No, that's not Brian. Shut up." He shook his head. "I'm done." The moderator looked horrified. "Do we need to call the police?" Teresa stepped forward. "They're already involved." The room buzzed louder. Melissa stood abruptly, knocking her chair over. "This isn't over." But nobody moved to help her. Nobody defended her. Nobody believed her anymore. She stormed toward the exit, but halfway there, she froze. The DA entered the room. Melissa's face collapsed. "This is a preliminary notice," the DA said, handing her a document. "You are now under active investigation for fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, and property theft." Melissa looked like the ground had disappeared under her. My son stepped back from her, not toward her. The DA then turned to me. "Mr. Hargrove, you are safe. The law is on your side." And just like that, it was finally over. Not with shouting, not with a dramatic punch, but with truth landing like a hammer on the people who thought they could break me. I sat slowly, tears burning behind my eyes as Walt squeezed my shoulder. I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because they underestimated an old man who'd spent his whole life surviving things far worse than a spoiled daughter-in-law with a plan. And now, the healing could begin. After meeting, the world felt quieter, not empty, not hollow, just finally calm. For the first time in months, I walked out of a building without someone shadowing me, whispering about me, or plotting around me. Walt walked on one side, Teresa on the other, the cool night air washing over us like a long-awaited rinse after a bitter storm. My house looked different when we pulled up, not physically. Nothing had changed in the structure, the color, the porch light, but the weight around it had lifted. I had expected to feel broken, shaken, bitter. But what I felt instead was something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Ownership of my house, of my life, of myself. Melissa and my son were nowhere in sight. They had been ordered to vacate pending investigation, and the DA's office had forbidden them from contacting me directly. A sheriff's car had escorted them earlier to collect only their essential items. I wasn't present for it. I didn't want to watch them pack, But Walt said Melissa left the house screaming, and my son left quietly, shoulders slumped like a man who'd finally realized the price of his silence. I didn't celebrate. Not out loud. Not in any triumphant, chest-thumping way. I just sat on my own couch, inhaled deeply, and let my home feel like mine again. The ticking of the old wall clock seemed gentler. The hum of the refrigerator didn't sound judgmental. The air didn't feel thick with someone else's plans. It felt like living again. Walt brought in the binder, the one filled with evidence that had nearly become the coffin of my independence. He placed it on the coffee table gently. "You don't need this anymore," he said. I stared at it for a long moment. It represented everything I had survived: betrayal, manipulation, legal theft, emotional warfare. For a man my age, fear hits differently. It burrows, tells you're too old to fight back. But I fought, and I won. "Thanks," I said. My voice cracked. "For everything." He shrugged. "You'd have done it for me." I don't know if that's true, but maybe that's what real friends are. People who believe in the version of you that you forget exists. Later, after Walt left, Teresa called one last time to update me. "The investigation will move fast," she said. "But no matter how it unfolds, the worst is behind you. You stood up. That matters more than anything." When we hung up, I sat alone in my living room, letting the silence settle. It didn't feel like a punishment tonight. It felt earned. That night, I made myself a small dinner, roast chicken and green beans, nothing fancy, and I sat at my dining table. I didn't sit in the laundry room. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't feel like an intruder in my own home. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, every moment, every breath. People think old age weakens you. And yes, the body slows. The bones ache. The memories fade in places. But age also sharpens you, gives you a lifetime of knowing when someone is lying, when something is wrong, and when to finally stop being quiet. My daughter-in-law thought she could silence me. My son thought he could hide behind her. They learned the hard way that a man who has spent 72 years surviving grief, loss, work, war, and life itself is not someone you push into a laundry room. Not without consequences. In the weeks that followed, I began putting my home back in order. I changed locks. I organized my documents. I labeled drawers. I finally set up the security cameras Walt insisted on installing. For the first time in a while, I slept through the night without feeling watched. Neighbors began stopping by, some apologizing for believing Melissa's stories, others bringing casseroles or saying, "We're glad you're still here." I didn't hold grudges. People believe what they hear when they're told it confidently enough. I was just grateful the truth had spoken louder. Even my son eventually reached out through the DA's office, requesting a supervised meeting to apologize. I haven't decided yet if I'll see him. Betrayal doesn't unspool easily. Trust doesn't regrow fast. But maybe one day. For now, I'm taking small steps. Breathing deeper. Reading longer. Drinking my morning coffee at the table without glancing over my shoulder. Life didn't go back to how it was before. They never do after something breaks. But it grew into something sturdier. Something mine. So, if you're listening to this, if you've made it all the way to the end of my story, I want to ask you something from one old soul to another. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And thank you for being here with me. If you want more stories like this, tap subscribe.